In 100 days in 1994, roughly 800,000 people were killed in Rwanda. Most of them died within walking distance of their own homes. Most of them were killed by people they knew. 3 months before it began, the commander of the United Nations force in Rwanda sent a fax to New York. He told them where the weapons were. He told them there were lists. He told them the killing had been organized, trained for, and timed. New York told him to stand down. This is not a story about a warning that went missing. The warning arrived. It was read the same evening by the head of United Nations peacekeeping. It was answered within hours. The answer was no. To understand how that happened, you have to understand what the United Nations force in Rwanda actually was. Its name was UNAMIR, the United Nations Assistance Mission for Rwanda. It arrived in late 1993 to supervise a peace deal called the Arusha Accords, signed that August between the Rwandan government and a rebel movement called the Rwandan Patriotic Front. UNAMIR was a monitoring mission. It existed to watch. It was authorized to observe a ceasefire, to help secure the capital, and to report back. It was not authorized to fight. It was not authorized to raid buildings. And it was not, in the reading that headquarters would eventually apply, authorized to take weapons away from anyone. Its commander was a Canadian brigadier general named Romeo Dallaire. He had asked for a far larger force than he was given. What arrived peaked at roughly 2,500 soldiers, late, under-equipped, drawn from countries with very different levels of training. He was never issued formal rules of engagement. He wrote his own and sent them to New York. Headquarters neither approved them nor rejected them. That is the machine that received the warning. The warning did not arrive out of a clear sky. By January 1994, the paper trail was already years long. In December 1990, a Rwandan magazine called Kangura published a document titled The Hutu 10 Commandments. It instructed Hutus to show no mercy to Tutsis, to exclude them from business, from schools, from the army. It was not a leaked memo. It was printed openly for anyone to read. In August 1993, a United Nations Special Rapporteur named Wali Bakre Ndiaye submitted a report on killings in Rwanda. He had visited the country that spring. He wrote that the massacres of Tutsis could fall within the Genocide Convention. The word was in a United Nations document in 1993 before a single peacekeeper had landed in the country. The report went into the system and stayed there. In July 1993, a radio station began broadcasting from Kigali. Radio television Libre des Mille Collines. It played popular music, and between the songs it read out names. It called Tutsis cockroaches. It was funded by people close to the president. Through late 1993, Belgian intelligence reported that militias were being armed. Human rights organizations reported the same. Dallaire's own officers reported the same. Weapons were moving into the hands of a youth militia called the Interahamwe. None of it was secret. All of it was written down. By January 1994, the question was no longer whether something was coming. The question was who would be the first to say it plainly, in writing, to the people who could stop it. On the 10th of January 1994, Dallaire's officers met a man in Kigali. He gave the name Jean-Pierre. His full name was Jean-Pierre Abubakar Turatsinze. He said he was a senior trainer for the Interahamwe. Later investigation would complicate that. His wife would tell tribunal investigators he had worked as a driver for an intelligence official of the ruling party. He was closer to the machine than to its controls, but what he said was correct. He said the Interahamwe had been trained across the country under the cover of a civil defense program. He said the militia in Kigali had been organized into cells. He said he had been ordered to register every Tutsi in the capital and that he suspected the register was for their extermination. He said his men could kill up to 1,000 people in 20 minutes. He said there were arms caches. He said he could show them. And he said one more thing. He said there was a plan to provoke the Belgian contingent of the peacekeeping force to kill Belgian soldiers and to force Belgium to pull out. The point was not to fight the United Nations. The point was to make the United Nations leave. The following day, Dallaire sent a coded cable to the Department of Peacekeeping Operations in New York, addressed to General Maurice Barrel. The subject line was procedural and almost bureaucratic: request for protection for informant. It laid out everything the informant had said. It stated that UNAMIR intended to act within 36 hours, and it asked headquarters for guidance on one point only: how to protect and evacuate the man who had told them. Dallaire was not reckless about it. He noted in writing that the whole thing might be a trap. He said the operation would be called off at the first sign of undue risk. Then he ended the cable with a line that has followed him for the rest of his life. Pour ce que veut. Allons-y. Where there is a will, there is a way. Let's go. The cable was read at headquarters by the senior staff of the peacekeeping department, including its head, Kofi Annan. The reply went out that same evening, New York time. It came from Annan's office and was signed by his deputy, Iqbal Riza. It said the information was cause for concern. It said there were inconsistencies in it. It said the information had to be handled with caution. And then it gave the instruction that decides this story: no reconnaissance, no other action, no response to the request for protection. Nothing until clear guidance came from headquarters. Instead, Dallaire was told to take the informant's information to the president of Rwanda, the man whose own party's militia was the subject of it. Rwanda, at that moment, held a seat on the United Nations Security Council. Understand the pressure that produced that answer, because it was not indifference. It was fear, and it had a date. 3 months earlier, in October 1993, 18 American soldiers had been killed in Mogadishu. The images went around the world. The United States began withdrawing from Somalia and began writing rules designed to keep itself out of the next one. The appetite in New York for a peacekeeping mission that raided buildings, seized weapons, and got soldiers killed in Africa was zero. The mandate said, monitor. Anything more was mission creep, and mission creep had just cost 18 American lives on live television. So the cable was answered correctly according to the mandate, and it did not end there. Through February and March, Dallaire reported more caches, more militia activity, more evidence. He asked repeatedly for authority to act. Each request was refused or narrowed. The 11th of January cable was never passed to the Security Council. The other 14 members of the body that could have changed the mandate did not know it existed. The caches were not raided. Jean-Pierre was never evacuated. He was never heard from again. On the 6th of April, 1994, the aircraft carrying the president of Rwanda was shot down as it approached Kigali. Within hours, roadblocks went up across the capital. They had been planned, the lists came out, they had been prepared. The next morning, 10 Belgian peacekeepers guarding the Prime Minister were disarmed and killed. The Prime Minister, Agatha Uwilingiyimana, was killed the same day. She was the woman who, 3 months earlier, had told UNAMIR she had total confidence in the informant. The killing of the Belgians did exactly what Jean-Pierre had said it was designed to do. Belgium withdrew. On the 21st of April, with the slaughter already underway and already reported, the Security Council voted to cut UNAMIR to 270 soldiers. The United Nations did not reinforce the mission when the genocide began. It shrank it. Dallaire stayed with a few hundred men, almost no fuel, and no authority to intervene. They held what sites they could and sheltered the people who reached them. They could not do more. The killing ran for roughly 100 days. It ended when the Rwandan Patriotic Front took the country by force. It did not end because anyone came. While it was happening, governments avoided the word genocide because the word carried obligations under a convention most of them had signed. Officials were briefed to say acts of genocide instead. The distinction was not academic, it was the difference between having to act and being able to watch. In 1999, Kofi Annan, by then Secretary General, commissioned an independent inquiry into what the United Nations had done. It was chaired by Ingvar Carlsson, a former Prime Minister of Sweden. The report was published on the 15th of December 1999. It is a United Nations document catalogued as S 1999-1257. It is, in large part, a document about another document. The 11th of January cable runs all the way through it. Carlsson said the cable contained very important information and that most of that information turned out to be correct. The inquiry found that the failure to prevent the genocide was a failure of the United Nations system as a whole. It named the Secretariat. It named the Security Council. It named the member states who would not send troops. It found the mission was starved of resources from the beginning and that the political will to act was never there. Annan accepted the findings in full. When the report reached the Security Council, the representative of the Netherlands asked the question that hangs over the entire file. What could have been done if Dalair's cable had been handled properly? He answered it himself, replying that the proposed action would exceed the mandate was not proper handling. The inquiry's military member said Dalair had been given a flawed mandate, that he did not have the men or the equipment he needed, and that under those conditions he acquitted himself well. Romeo Dalair came home. He was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder and medically released from the Canadian Forces in 2000. That same year, he was found unconscious on a park bench in Hull, Quebec, after taking his own life to the edge. He survived. He was appointed to the Canadian Senate in 2005, and he has spent the decade since telling anyone who will listen what he saw, what he wrote, and what he was told in reply. Everything the informant described happened. The caches were real. The lists were real. The plan to kill the Belgians in order to force a withdrawal was real, and it worked precisely as he said it would. The information was accurate. The chain of command was intact. The fax was sent, received, read, and answered inside of a day. The failure was not that nobody saw it coming. The failure was that they did. If you want to keep following the warnings the world ignored, subscribe. Every disaster leaves a paper trail. We follow it.